the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua, once again. And our question for today: what is revolutionary optimism and how can it transform both your personal life and the world's toughest crisis? It's a heavy question today, but we have the perfect guest to answer that. Today, Dr. Paul Zeitz is a physician, an epidemiologist, and award winning advocate for global justice and human rights with over 35 years of experience. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the initiator of hashtag Unify, a movement building platform dedicated to catalyzing love centered social, economic, and political systems. Zeitz co founded the Brave Movement and Keeps Kids Safe, which aim to end childhood sexual violence. He served as the director of Data Revolution for Sustainable Development under the Obama and Trump administration and founded the Global AIDS Alliance. Dr. Zeitz is also the author of Waging Justice and Waging Optimism. And with his latest book today, Revolutionary Optimism, he offers a roadmap for personal and global transformation. And today he will share all that insight with us, all that experience. I am quite excited for this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Paul Zeitz, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Hey, Joshua. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you.
Doctor, it's been a long road for you. We cannot state that enough. It's been 35 years of activism, of activist activities, and all, fighting for social justice, global justice, human rights. I always start this question this way. I always start the show this way. Where did it all begin? What inspired you to dedicate your career to global justice, human rights? How did your personal experiences shape this journey? Did you always know that you were going to get into this? What happened? What is the story of Dr. Paul Zeitz?
Thank you for that question. No, I had no idea how my life would unfold. And during college, I decided to go to medical school. So I pursued
Hmm.
medicine. And in my second or third year, I realized I didn't really want to do clinical medicine
Oh,
because I am red green colorblind. So I really couldn't see rashes and I'm squeamish. And I really didn't like seeing all the blood and guts that a clinical provider has to deal with. So I ended up finding public health and preventive medicine as a
oh,
way that I
interesting.
could serve. And I then went on to do a residency in public health and preventive medicine at Johns Hopkins University. And
Hmm.
during that time, I learned about the idea that if we have an available technology, like at that time we were focusing on childhood vaccination,
Right?
we would bring it to scale. So I got
Huh.
trained by the leaders that led the global smallpox eradication program.
Huh.
And so my first job out of all that was focusing on polio eradication.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was always like thinking about uh, how do you take available solutions and make them equitably available to all
Right?
people everywhere. And then
Hmm.
I found my way into public health and in sub-Saharan Africa, and I moved with my
Uh-huh.
young family to Zambia, and I
Uh-huh.
was living there during the heyday of the AIDS pandemic in
Right.
the late
Right.
90s when
Hmm.
HIV was devastating
Hmm.
the population. We did the first
Hmm.
studies to show that about 20%, one out of five adults 15 to 44 years old, were infected with HIV. And at
Oh
that
my.
time, it was a death sentence.
Oh my.
So
Of
one
course.
day I was driving by the university teaching hospital, which
Hmm.
in Zambia they call the departure lounge because people just went there to die. The healthcare system was so collapsed.
Wow.
The healthcare availability of medicines and even providers was very limited.
Wow.
And I was driving up to this intersection, which I had driven by many, many times. But this one day, I actually saw something there that I had kind of ignored.
Hmm.
And it was a Christian Aid youth project. It was a white
Oh.
minivan,
Oh wow.
and it was a Christian Aid youth project.
Hmm.
And they were selling coffins. They
Oh
were
my
selling
goodness.
large coffins and small coffins for children.
Wow. Oh.
And I just pulled over on the side of the road and I wept in despair at the
Oh
state
my goodness.
of what I witnessed. I
Hmm.
thought at
Hmm.
that moment, can you imagine what Jesus Christ would have thought that his name and his philosophy would have
Hmm.
allowed this global inequity, this
Yes.
despair, this crushing virus that was totally treatable at that time.
Hmm.
You remember the life-saving AIDS medicines were available in North America, Europe, Japan, the global north,
Right.
but they
Right.
were not available in Africa at that time. So
Yes.
I had an awakening or a
Hmm.
revelation or a
Hmm.
meltdown or something happened where I said, I'm going to commit to doing whatever I can
Oh wow.
to end the AIDS epidemic. And then I
Wow.
became an activist, and I've been doing advocacy and activism ever since.
And it's the rest is history, but more like you are pointing towards the future as well, especially since that moment where it all came together, a breakdown, a revelation, and that singular moment I feel must have been so powerful. But all the moments that came after that as well that you've experienced that kind of built up to this, because how can we stand by, right, and witness this happen? And it really talks a lot about your journey throughout all of these past 5 years and your previous books as well. I mean, literally, your previous books are Waging Justice and Waging Optimism. It has been quite the fight that you have been fighting. The battles have you been fighting. Talk to us a little bit about that journey and how it's been so far. You talked to us about the origins. Now talk to us a little bit about up to this point before we start getting into your new book. Talk to us about all the other initiatives you've gotten into, the activism that stood out to you, and how have you been waging justice and optimism throughout all these years?
Yeah, thank you. So soon after I made that commitment to do whatever I could, I ended up leaving Zambia and coming back to Washington. And at that time, there was no action happening, no advocacy happening on
Mm-hmm.
global AIDS that was
Wow.
going to solve the problem over there.
Mhm,
So, fast forward, I became part of a movement, people
mhm,
living with AIDS, both in Africa and in the United States, joined forces in a global solidarity movement, and we
mhm,
built political pressure. And actually, the U.S. government then ramped up, and it launched the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. We launched a
right,
global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria.
mhm,
And literally, billions of dollars have now been spent, and over 40 million lives have been saved because of that
wow,
advocacy movement
wow,
that happened at that time. Now, I was
mhm,
just one person. My organization was just one entity. There were
wow,
literally hundreds and thousands of people around the world. But
wow,
my role was to be the catalyst and to be the voice that spoke truth to power. And
mhm,
I had the honor of working with Nobel laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu, for example, and
wow,
we learned how to bring the voice of leaders into the political
oh, wow,
space. And the thing that I learned that I want to share with you now is that everyone
please,
told me that what I was advocating for was absolutely impossible. I was actually laughed out of the room.
oh
My
my,
peers said, "You're crazy. It's never going to happen." And then we got all this to happen. So that's my guiding star in my life,
mhm,
that we
mhm,
actually built an interpartisan movement, Democrats and Republicans across the political spectrum,
mhm,
and we did this globally. We mobilized leaders all over the world, the UN, the business leaders also stepped up to participate in this opportunity that humanity had at that time to
right,
really control and end global AIDS. And
mhm,
it's still one of the most successful efforts that has happened in the last 50 years or so. So then I realized that my
mhm,
advocacy and activism skills had been honed, and I wanted
There
to
you go.
apply it to other issue areas.
There you go. Precisely. And now it's a great transition as well, right? But first of all, I mean, wow, like what an achievement, what a crowning achievement to your experience. And I love how you said that you were the voice that spoke truth to power, but also bringing in other leaders to be able to speak the same truth and join that movement. And it's wow, what a victory it must have felt. But the battle wages on, right? The battle, there's still a
Yeah,
fight to be
absolutely.
fought.
Yeah, so I learned that if you take a stand for what you believe in and you
Hmm.
make that commitment, and
Hmm.
then you explore, you keep shape shifting, you keep learning how to serve, you keep asking how to serve, and
Hmm.
so then I decided to get really involved in the climate emergency, which is affecting many countries around the world. And I got involved in that space. I've gotten involved in ending childhood sexual violence. I'm a survivor
Right.
of familial sexual violence at the hands
Hmm.
of my father, which I didn't
Hmm.
know about my whole adult life.
Hmm.
And that really is part of my story. So
Hmm.
I experienced injustice as a
Hmm.
very young boy,
Hmm.
and I didn't know why I was drawn to work on
Hmm.
these justice issues and why I worked on child health and child survival and AIDS and ending child survival. And then I had this revelation, oh, I was a
Wow.
survivor of that.
Wow.
And that was another big part of my journey.
Hmm.
So, yeah. And now I'm working on everything that we can do to protect democracy. As you know,
Hmm.
we're in a very troubled time. And actually, I realized a couple years ago that 2024 was going to be an epic year of crisis and
Hmm.
opportunity. And that is
Hmm.
why I
Hmm.
decided to take all the experience of my life and my personal experience. I did a lot of research, I studied the literature, I
Hmm.
studied all different kinds of movements, and
Hmm.
I generated revolutionary optimism. And I really
Wow.
did it partly for myself because
Hmm.
sometimes I get hopeless and I get
Yes.
skeptical and I get
Yes.
despairing and I
Hmm.
feel like nothing's possible. So
Yes.
I had to develop a set of tools and practices and ways of being and living that
Wow.
could, so I could generate myself every day with commitment as a revolutionary optimist.
Wow. It's fantastic. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge your bravery in all of this. It's no question that you've seen the success that you have as well in fighting these battles, because when people see that bravery in other people, it gives also the courage for them to fight the same battles that they've fought and the same battles that they've been waging inside themselves. But Dr. Paul, like you said, it these are hopeless times. They do feel very, very. I mean, I am a outsider perspective outside the U.S., seeing what is happening there politically. But what I keep telling my friends and what I keep telling everyone, the implications of what is going to happen there politically, socially, has a lot of implications of what's going to happen here with us as well and everywhere else in the world. We're already seeing that, in fact. So it is like, what do you call this? Like you said, it's an epic year of crisis and opportunities, an epic year of storm, almost like a boiling point to me. It feels like something is about brewing, that if we don't do something right, or if we don't change something, if we don't revolutionize something, we might get to that point of no return, right? And it might be difficult to turn back from that. But now you've given us a voice, and you talk about this in your book, and you talk a lot about this in your experience. Now you put it all together, not just, well, first of all, for you as well, to give that
Yeah.
hope in this hopelessness. I love that, by the way. But now you're giving the same hope to us. But why is it hopeful, so to speak? Talk to us about revolutionary optimism. Why can it transform our personal lives, our optimism, despite the toughest crisis that we are facing today?
Yeah, so thank you. So the what you said, I totally agree with. I feel like humanity is at that a crossroads,
Hmm.
like where I was when saw that Christian Aid Youth Project,
Right,
and it was a
right.
crossroads in my life.
Hmm.
I do agree with you that we're at that point for
Mhm.
humanity.
Mhm.
And many people feel hopeless and despairing, like I have felt, and I do feel it
Mhm.
sometimes now, even. And
Mhm.
so, revolutionary optimism is 7 steps for living as a love centered activist. The first half
Wow.
of the book is
Mhm.
really about our own journey, our
Mhm.
personal creation of ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
And it's about waking up every day and
Mhm.
asking, how can we serve? And my
Mhm.
view is that most of us, including you and your listeners, are already love centered activists, because love centered activism is about every love centered action counts. And that
Right.
includes taking care of ourselves,
Yes. Yes.
everything that we do to take care of our family, our children, our partner, our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, our
Mhm.
community. All that is part of love centered activism. And
Mhm.
then when we branch out to take action in support of our community through the private sector or the public sector
Mhm.
or whatever way we choose to do it, all that
Mhm.
counts. And so I
Yes.
want people to feel like what they're doing already matters and already is part
Mhm.
of this revolution. And my
Wow.
theory is that we have the violent revolutions already unfolding. We have
All the time.
the devastation, the suffering, and with the
Always.
climate emergency, we're just at the beginning
Mhm.
of the havoc that we're on the
Mhm.
cusp of experiencing. So
Yes.
humanity is going through a passage, and so the second half of the book really is about our collective liberation
Mhm.
and this opportunity that we have to generate peaceful revolutions as a
Yes.
response to all the devastation. And it really
Wow.
is an invitation to rise, mobilize, connect, build love
Mhm.
centered movements, and
Mhm.
really change the trajectory of everything that's happening. And the fundamental thing, you already said it, I'll just repeat it quickly, which is right now we have social, economic, and political systems that are greed driven or extractive driven,
Mhm.
are they're based on caste systems where one
Mhm.
group of people is oppressing other groups of people, and we can heal all that. That's all
Mhm.
healable. We can not, it's not like we're trying to fix it, but we
Mhm.
can transform it through healing and repair.
Mhm.
And that's what I think we can do now. We need to do it now, as you said.
Wow. And it's, of course, the question begins when you are faced with all this crisis, is all this hopelessness. The question always is, where do I even start? Right? Like, what can I even start doing to face or to fight these hopelessness? And what you're telling us that right now, doctor, is you start with yourself. You start with this self love. You start with a love centered activism. And really, you mentioned this, and I believe this is step two, which is self liberation. Liberating oneself to find and act from your unique path of service. And I think that's beautiful, first of all, because we all are drawn to social causes. Like, we have our own survivorship biases, we have our own experiences that we want to draw ourselves into. And whenever we ask that question, that where do I start, first of all, we could start with ourselves, but also we can begin, drawing ourselves and creating that unique path of service. Because in all this space of this hopelessness, correct me if I'm mistaken, Doc, this is what I get from you, what you're teaching us today, is that these big players are all over us playing all these games, but maybe we can start creating these small actions, love centered actions, and then that cascades into more, unifying consciousness with others and unifying it with everyone else. And then further on, maybe we'll inspire leaders who will take care of us better, right? And I feel like that is just a iceberg, the tip of the iceberg when you're talking about revolutionary optimism. But Doc, I want to talk about something specific because this one stood out to me. This one stood out to me, which was particularly, of course, you have 7 steps. I wish we had the time to go through every step, Doc, but we can't. But I would love to hone in on one particular step, and that's step number 4. The step number
Mm,
4 is peace crafting, which is really literally healing the separation and conflict between people, organizations, emerging into going into collaborations, right? Uh, for mutual benefit. How do you think step four, which is peace crafting, how do you how do you see that, or teach us what are the actionable steps? How does that translate into actionable steps in real world scenarios, especially with what we are facing? Can you share an example from your own experience?
Yes, so peace crafting is the heart of the book. It's step four. It's right in the middle of the book, and it
Wow.
really is about as we're on the process of self liberating and
Hmm.
figuring out how we're going to serve. It's about how we're going to relate to each other. It's like how you and I are relating, and how we're relating to your listeners right now.
Hmm.
And it's also how I relate to my wife and my children, and
Hmm.
it's also how I relate to my comrades or my fellow people that I'm working on
Hmm.
movement building with, or anything
Hmm.
that I've done in my life. So I created peace crafting as like a new thing. Like it's an art, it's a craft. You got to practice it, and
Hmm.
it's a 4-part cycle. And I have imagined a the spinning circle in my head now,
Right.
and it has 4 parts. Its
Uh-huh.
first part is be a listening friend. Learn how to listen. Ask yourself the question,
Right.
why am I talking? Wait, why am I talking? And take the time to listen, because that can actually be the most powerful thing when other people actually feel heard by you
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
and by each other. Then the second part of peace crafting is embracing multiple perspectives. A lot of
Yes.
times right now in this division, it's like people are fixed in their idea of what the truth is, and it's like my way or the highway. And I actually think there's about 8 billion people on the planet, so there's probably 8 billion perspectives. As you said, we each have our own
Hmm.
experience, so really working at that. Third part
Hmm.
is love speech. So even if
Wow.
I don't agree with someone, even if I get triggered by someone, even if I
Hmm.
don't like someone, I have to make sure every word or every utterance out of this mouth is
Yes.
love speech. It's seeing
Yes.
each other as their highest self. It's
Hmm.
uplifting them. It's giving them an opportunity to listen and learn themselves. And then lastly, it's about building trust. And I offer something called a trustometer, which
Hmm.
is a response to, in my life, I thought I trust you or I don't. It was like an on or off switch. And the
Hmm.
trustometer actually creates it where I can love everyone, but I don't trust everyone. So,
Hmm.
and people can go up and down on the trustometer based on my interactions. And that keeps me open to being able to be in rebuilding and reconnecting in relationships. And this applies not just at the individual level, but it
Hmm.
also applies at a collective level or organizational
Hmm.
level. How many times
Hmm.
have we worked with an org that we say, oh, we don't like them, we're done with them?
Right.
So
Right.
uh, that 4-part cycle, I imagine it in my head, and then oh my god, I had a fight with my wife, and I've
Wow.
said where I said, oh my god, I did not use love speech. Something nasty just came out of my
Wow.
mouth,
Wow.
and I just like, and then my wife and I can laugh about that now after 33 years of marriage, but you know.
Wow.
It was for me to monitor what I'm saying and how I'm saying things.
It's a
So
perfect.
for me, it was really like applying it. For example, like I
Uh-huh.
went to Israel Palestine in April a couple months ago,
Wow. Wow.
and I decided to meet with Israelis and Palestinians in the middle
Hmm.
of this war. And
Wow.
I felt like my ability. I was doing a stress test, and as being a revolutionary optimist in the face of
Hmm.
this very traumatized environment,
Hmm.
and I was doing peace crafting. I was listening to the Palestinian view and the Israeli
Right.
view, and
Right.
in a way that I had never done before. And I
Hmm.
felt like out of all that, I was able to find like new ideas and new
Hmm.
solutions. Like I actually
Hmm.
left there feeling, wow, this crisis could lead to a peaceful revolution where we could have a way forward.
Hmm.
So that is how I have been applying it in my life.
Wow, and it's a great guidance for not just for you, Dr. Paul, of course. And it's like again, we're talking about actionable steps. And you literally just gave us actionable steps on these four cycles that you said that we could just keep going through in our mind and like, wow, did I talk out of love? I think that's just very important, and that's something that we need in the world today. So, Doc, um, we are facing super crisis. Is what we're looking at right now. with the myriad of everything that we're facing in the world today, how do you see revolutionary optimism coexisting with systemic injustices? We encounter this daily, but what can we do daily as an individual to practice this revolutionary optimism? If there was one action that you were going to leave with us today, with the audience and listeners, how do we face these super crises individually, and how can we take action as ourselves as individuals?
Well, I want to offer revolutionaryoptimism.com. I
Hmm.
do feel like that's a way you can buy the book, and then also you can get a free Changemakers companion kit if
Wow.
you sign up on my list. And I do believe that the best way forward for revolutionary optimism is to explore it with friends or family or a book club or civic groups or church groups or spiritual groups,
Hmm.
because it's an opportunity to deepen friendships and to explore these questions.
Yes, yes,
And a big through line through the book is that we're in this together. Because
yes,
sometimes when
yes.
I'm feeling despairing and hopeless, I isolate myself. I throw the
Hmm.
blanket over my heads and I think I'm
Mm.
alone in my despair.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I just throw up my hands and say, forget it, I'm done.
Right,
And so the truth is that we're all interconnected.
right.
And I think the reality of the super crises is bringing this opportunity of massive revolutionary transformation
Hmm.
peacefully,
Hmm.
where if enough of us rise, if enough of us use
There
love
you go.
centered speech,
There we go.
then we can transform our
Hmm.
social, economic, and political systems.
Hmm.
So the takeaway that I would offer is ask yourself, what would it look like if I put love at the center of everything I did? Every
Wow.
step, every breath, every action,
Wow.
every word. And then just keep asking that question about 1,000 times a day and
Yes.
start exploring how your life is unfolding. And
Perfect.
then you will see opportunities to shift into this love centered mode.
I love it. I love it, Doc. And this is a message that has been ringing through the ages. It's a great reminder. And now is the same message that you are saying in an optimistic way as well. Like, again, like measure your days in love, right? Measure your minutes in love, right? And it's something that we truly need. We started this show before we started recording. You said revolutionary optimism. The world needs it right now, and the world needs it more than ever. And I truly agree, not just there in the US, every part of the world where we are facing crisis, we are facing it in all corners right now, and it does feel hopeless. But again, perhaps we can start something. We can start something with ourselves individually, unify together, and then cascade and create those actions and start influencing everyone else around us. Doctor, I love the message. Thank you for coming on and telling us about all of this.
Yeah, you said earlier that bravery is contagious, and I totally
Hmm.
agree with that. And I
Hmm.
probably should have told you up front that revolutionary optimism is highly contagious, and there's
Oh,
no cure and no vaccine. So once
oh,
people
wow.
start experiencing revolutionary optimism, then
Hmm.
all bets are off, and we can do this healing, repair, and transformation into a better world for ourselves, but also for our children, grandchildren, and all future generations.
Yeah, well, and it's always a good thing to hear that there is no cure for good change. Right, Doctor?
Right, exactly.
We would love that, and everyone would love that. It's what we need today. Doctor, you've mentioned your book. Where can we find your book? You also mentioned your website, revolutionaryoptimism.com. Let us know where else we can find you, where you're most active in. Where can we stay up with the latest activism of Dr. Paul Zeitz? Let us all just know.
Yeah, so the first port of entry is through revolutionaryoptimism.com to buy
Mhm.
the book and then get the Changemakers companion kit.
Mhm.
Really invite people to do that. And then, if you want to learn more about the advocacy and campaigning movements that are operating in the United States and globally, check out unifymovements.org, where we're featuring solidarity movements where people can learn about the cutting edge of overcoming the climate emergency, of
Mhm.
dealing with economic inequality, of strengthening democracy, and all those things that I talked about earlier. If you want to reach me personally, go to Dr. Paul Zeitz, drpaulzeitz.org, and you can email me right through there. And I'm here to support and serve you. So if there's ways that you want to build a movement and you want to explore these ideas, I'm available to support your efforts.
Doc, it's been a great episode. It's been a great time with you. I feel the love, all the messages that you are coming through. I feel the optimism. I feel the revolution coming on, and I love that you are at the forefront of this voice and with the message that we need to spread around the world. Dr. Paul, one last thing to leave our audience and listeners. One quick one. Take us home.
It's go time.
It's
It's
go
time to
time.
go. It's
It's
time
go
to
time.
rise.
It
That's
is.
actually the first step, but I actually
Yes.
end with that too. It's
Hmm.
like, it's go time, rise, mobilize,
Hmm.
synchronize.
Hmm.
It's time. We have to do this now.
Hmm.
And it's get over ourselves and get moving.
Put time to put love into action. Day one is today, if not yesterday. Dr. Paul, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for this message. I absolutely love it. I'm sure I speak with the audience and listeners as well that they have been inspired with the same message. And we move forward with your revolutionary optimism.
Thank you, Joshua. Have a great week.
Fantastic. To all our audience and listeners out there, see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.